I have of late, but wherefore I know not, lost all my mirth, forgone all custom of exercises, and indeed it goes so heavily with my disposition that this goodly frame, the earth, seems to me a sterile promontory, this most excellent canopy, the air, look you, this brave, hanging firmament, this majestical roof fretted with golden fire. Why, it appeareth nothing to me but a foul and pestilent congregation of vapours. What a piece of work is a man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god. The beauty of the world, the paragon of animals. And yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust?
This thing arises that bugs us human beings beyond belief. That is self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is, in one sense, our pride as human beings. It's the great thing we have. We can not only be happy, but we can know we're happy. We can not only think, but we can think about thinking. And therein lies the whole possibility of reasoning. To think about thinking, to know about knowing, to be aware of what one does. Herein is the whole birth of a rational control of behavior, which you might say is the glory of civilization. It gave you the gift of being like God. That is to say, the gift of being able to control the course of events. And anybody who controls the course of events, you see, probably puts himself in the situation of the sorcerer's apprentice. The Lord looking down there and says, okay, you wanted to be God, man, you go ahead and try. You get in more and more of a mess. You know, you succeed amazingly. Just like the sorcerer's apprentice actually made that broom go and fetch water for him. But he couldn't stop it. And as we say today, you can't stop progress and the glory of man. But at the same time, it's a perfect pest. Because how do you know when to stop thinking about thinking? For instance, you think over a problem, you've got to make a decision. How long should you think about it? How much evidence should you collect before you take a step? You never know. Actually, what most of us do is we think about a given decision until it's a nuisance, and then or the time is too late to think about it anymore, then we do something. We never are sure that we decided the right thing, and one of the troubles about thinking about decisions is there are ever so many unpredictable variables that come into everything. And you may work out the most perfect business contract and everything is fine, but you didn't bargain for the banana skin that you were going to slip on your way to your partner's office or whatever it was. Such things couldn't be predicted in any amount of decision-making. And the more we try to elaborate perfectly foolproof methods of arranging our lives, the more we find ourselves encumbered with impossible details. So then the whole problem of self-consciousness is that you're always in a dither and a doubt. We call this anxiety. And a nostalgia develops among us for the age of innocence. Would it be nice not to have to make any decisions, to act entirely on whim? And if you got into trouble, well, that would be all right, because you wouldn't have been worrying about it. See, when a moth mistakes a candle for its sex call, which is what happens, that's why moths fly into candles, the moth makes a mistake, and powie, it goes out. That's that. Moth doesn't worry on the way to the candle whether it's going to get burned. And of course, the moths are sufficiently prolific so that one moth more or less lost in a candle doesn't matter. Hundreds of moths lost in candles don't matter. They just go on. And so you might imagine a human civilization where people make mistakes. And yes, they go off with a glorious bang instead of a whimper. And that's that. They wouldn't worry. They'd live magnificently.
This discourse of the Bhagavad Gita, beginning on the edge of the battlefield, is very much about fighting, but is also not really about fighting. Arjuna has fought lots of battles. He's not against fighting. It's not a treatise about just or unjust wars. There is an important sense in which it is not about war at all. It is about this term dharma. Arjuna's dharma and the conflict of dharma that he experiences here. So the place of this battle is on the field of dharma, dharma kshetra. And it is the battlefield of right and duty and justice and order and conscience, all of those things that go into this very rich and important term, dharma.
Arjun looked at the armies. He saw his teachers and elders, friends and relatives on the other side. It made him very sad, and he said, "How can I fight my own people for just a kingdom?" Hearing this, Krishna said, "This is not the time to despair, Arjuna. Take up your weapons and fight. You are a warrior, and it is your duty to fight for a cause. Cast aside all your doubts, Arjun. Do not think about the consequences, for they are not in your hands. The important thing is to act. The outcome of your action is secondary."
But Krishna asks Arjuna to renounce something far more difficult than action. He asks him to renounce the fruit of action. He asks him to renounce his personal stake as Arjuna, the hero, in the battle that is ahead. He instructs him to act without attachment to the fruits of action. Nishkama is the term, to act without passion, without attachment. And he asks him to act without the purpose of acquiring fruits from that action. And the term he uses is nishpalartha, without attachment to the fruits of action.
"I am still confused, Krishna. How do I attain detachment?" Krishna replied, "When you remove yourself from the attachments of the body and become one with your soul, then you will attain the state of detachment. Detachment is freeing oneself from the emotions of action. Detach yourself from the earthly relations, Arjun, and develop a universal relationship with all. Look at everyone, whether friend or foe, as the same. Then you will be able to reach the ultimate." The ultimate? Krishna, what is the ultimate? How can a human being attain it? Asked Arjun. Krishna smiled and said, "The ultimate is the God Almighty, which is evident within each one as the Atma. A union with the Self is a union with the Supreme Being. This union is called the Yoga."
Krishnamurti says to people, now look, there is nothing you can do to be liberated, because all your efforts in the direction of liberation are phony. They are based on your desire to boost and continue your ego, and that will never lead to liberation. All you can do, he says, is to be aware of yourself as you are, without judgment. See what is. But then, if you can do that, you have no further problem. But if you try to do it, you're in the same mess all over again.
But the fundamental to understand is that Shankara's definition of God, his understanding of Vedanta, is based on you yourself are non-different from God. There is no distinction from yourself and the deity. Thank you. And moksha, liberation from rebirth, which again is the goal of Vedanta, is the goal of Shankara, is obtained only by knowledge. Jnana is the only path to moksha, and Shankara is absolutely insistent upon that, which is why he has this massive argument with Mandana Mishra, because Mandana's going on about rituals, do this, do that, do that, do it, and Shankara's saying rituals are okay, they might purify you, but you won't get the ultimate goal from ritual. The ultimate goal comes not from what you do, but from your consciousness, your realization. The moment you realize the identity of the self with Brahman, then moksha occurs. It's nothing to do with the rituals you've performed. You can't do a sort of tally up. I've now done 25 million Agnihoma yagyas, therefore I'm going to be liberated. It's that point at which you realise the identity of the self with Brahman. And I would even go as far as to say that you might characterise Shankara's Advaita as non-theistic, because the notion of Brahman as the absolute single reality isn't really identical with God. It's not the God in the Western sense that we understand as an all-powerful, omnipotent being on high. God is more of a philosophical concept which is identical with the absolute reality.
Gurdjieff played the same game in a different way. He said, the most important thing is self-remembering. Always at every moment be aware of what you're doing. Watch yourself constantly and never be absent-minded. But we can't possibly go back and do that. You can't on purpose give up self-consciousness. You can't give up worrying. You can't give up thinking about yourself. And above all, you're terrified to live spontaneously because you might do something wrong. However, the center of Zen training is to live spontaneously. And this is why it's so fascinating to many Western people, especially Western intellectuals, who are overburdened with self-consciousness. Because what fascinated people about Zen when they first heard of it through Dr. Suzuki's writings was Zen stories. I lent a book of Zen stories once to a friend of mine, years and years ago, and he was in hospital. And when he gave it back to me, he said, gee, he said, I didn't understand a word of it, but it cheered me up enormously.
The lover of wisdom will himself become orderly and divine in the measure permitted to man, and a compulsion is laid upon him to practice stamping on the plastic matter of human nature, in public and private, the patterns that he envisions.
Knowledge begins with self-knowledge. Together, they provide the key to ethics for Plato.